Okay, so usually when a company's profits plunge 35% in a single quarter, someone is in serious trouble. But with Nike today, they are actually bragging that it was on purpose.
Yeah, the classic self-inflicted wound, but, a highly orchestrated one.
Right, exactly. Welcome to Earnings Unscripted, by the way. It is March 31, 2026, and we are unpacking Nike's third quarter results. Ticker is NKE. And just a quick, mandatory reminder before we dig in, we are just two people thinking out loud here, so please do not take any of this as actual financial advice.
Exactly. Strictly our own opinions. In my opinion, is that taking a $4 billion sledgehammer to your own iconic sneaker lines is a massive flex.
It really is. So let's look at the damage. Revenue came in at $11.28 billion. That is down about 9% from last quarter, basically flat year over year. And EPS dropped to 35 cents, down 34% quarter over quarter.
True, but it still handily beat the street. I mean, expectations were only around 30 cents. The bar was basically on the floor. The number that actually matters is operating income. That completely cratered to $635 million. That's a drop of almost 36%.
Which makes total sense when you literally rip your most famous shoes off the shelves. They held back, I think they said roughly 5 points of revenue growth just to stop deep discounting on the Air Force Ones and the Dunks.
Right. They're calling it removing unhealthy inventory. And look, gross margins slipped to 40.2%. A decent chunk of that is North American tariffs, but a lot of it is just the brutal cost of clearing out the pipes and trying to reset the brand.
And the market completely freaked out. The stock actually had a decent regular session today. It closed up almost 2%. But the second the market closed and the earnings call started, wow.
Down over 6% in the primary reaction. The sell-off was steep. It eventually stabilized somewhere around $48, but Wall Street does not like hearing the phrase $230 million severance charge.
Oh, geez, the severance. That is the wild part of this whole report, because for years, Nike, they completely obsessed over selling direct to consumer, bypassing their retail partners, cutting out the middlemen. They built
the famous Nike direct first offense. Yeah, that was practically religious dogma over there during the pandemic.
And now the new CEO is basically saying, oh, sorry, we broke the retail ecosystem. And it is costing them hundreds of millions just in layoffs across the supply chain and tech sectors to undo all that overbuilding.
Well, yes, unwinding a belief system, restructuring physical warehouses, legacy tech, everything. They are basically using this quarter as the giant kitchen sink to throw all the bad news into at once.
Yeah, Elliott Hill actually compared them to FC Barcelona's legendary soccer stadium right now. He said they're out there playing a match while there's literal scaffolding and cranes rebuilding the stands directly above them.
It's a great metaphor. Very poetic phrasing for, please excuse the massive construction dust while we try to sell you running apparel.
Precisely. Just don't look up at the falling concrete. All right, let's get into the details and see what this dust actually looks like on the balance sheet.
Well, if you look at the net income drop, that 35% plunge year over year we just mentioned, a huge chunk of that dust is basically an accounting illusion.
Okay, I am taking the bait. How is losing a third of your profit an illusion?
Fair point. The profit did fall. I mean, they're not hiding that. But the comparison is completely warped. Last year in Q3, they had this one-time non-cash deferred tax benefit. Their effective tax rate was under 6%. 6. This quarter, it normalized to exactly 20%.
Oh, wow. So they are comping against a phantom tax break.
Exactly. The business contracted, yes, but the math makes it look like a structural collapse when half of it is literally just a tax schedule returning to reality.
That actually makes me feel slightly better for them, but we should talk about where they are intentionally causing pain, because the Greater China strategy right now is wild. They actually saw standout growth there this quarter, up 13.5% sequentially.
They did. It was really the only region that worked. But, and this is the classic Matthew Friend move, the CFO got on the call and explicitly told everyone that China revenues are going to tank about 20% in Q4.
Right, and that is entirely by choice. They finally get a win in a notoriously complex market, and they just decide to turn the tap off.
Yeah, it goes back to the whole brand dilution issue we talked about with the classic shoes. Friend said they are, well, his exact phrase was, taking accelerated actions to clean up the marketplace. They are actively choking off the supply of goods to Chinese retailers. They care more about keeping the brand premium than juicing a single quarter's volume.
It is an expensive gamble, though, because they are leaning so hard into performance gear right now to fill the gap of all those withheld shoes.
They have to. Sportswear declined low double digits this quarter. Performance is growing, but it makes up less than half of their total portfolio right now. That math does not balance.
I know, but look at what happens when they actually do innovate. Did you catch the note about the new Nike Mind collection?
The pre-game apparel, right.
Yeah, the distraction clearing stuff. Elliott Hill brought it up on the call. It's protected by over 150 patents, and they sold out so fast that they literally had 2 million consumers sign up on a Notify Me waiting list. 2 million people just waiting to buy a warm-up suit.
Which is incredibly telling. It proves the consumer hasn't abandoned the brand. They're just bored of the rehashed classics. I mean, 2 million people on standby is massive, but sorry, it's still a drop in the bucket compared to the $4 billion hole they're digging by cutting the Air Force One supply.
Exactly. It shows the appetite is there, but the scale is off. Same with the outdoor stuff. They booked an actual experiential train in Europe to take people straight from Milan to the Alps just to highlight their winter gear.
The Alpine Express. Yeah, the marketing budget clearly survived the severance cuts. But you hit the core issue. You can throw experiential trains and patented warm-up suits at the wall, but until performance gear is big enough to offset the lifestyle decline, they're just stuck in the mud.
A classic transition phase, which brings up the obvious question. If the house is halfway through a remodel, how painful does the rest of this year get for investors? So where does this leave them heading into the summer?
Painful, but predictable. That is essentially what management is broadcasting. Look, the CFO is already bracing the street for Q4. Matthew Friend is saying revenue will drop probably another 2 to 4%. But the silver lining is the margin bleed is finally slowing down.
Right, because they are getting through the worst of that massive inventory purge. And honestly, it sounds like they're, well, basically writing off the rest of this fiscal year entirely.
Completely. They are explicitly laying out the turnaround calendar right now. First quarter of fiscal 2027 is the final quarter they have to eat these massive North American tariff headwinds. Real margin expansion, the actual inflection point they need, it does not actually hit until Q2 of 2027.
Which perfectly aligns with what Elliott Hill said. I actually loved this quote on the call. He said, I think everybody when I came into this role said, hey, it's going to take 2 years, and, that's where we're tracking right now.
That is incredible expectation management. You buy yourself a full 2 years by tearing down the house immediately. They even push their long-term guidance completely out to a fall investor day in Beaverton. They just want everyone looking at 2027, not the next 3 months.
And you know what? It might actually work. If you zoom out, the fundamental bet here isn't just about selling more shoes. It is a bet that brand prestige matters more than quarterly volume. They are sacrificing short-term cash flow to literally buy back their own exclusivity.
Yeah, it is corporate fasting. You starve the market of dunks today, so they are absolutely starving for whatever new innovation you drop tomorrow. If they survive the transition, it is a masterclass. If they do not, well, it is a very expensive business school case study on hubris.
I guess we will find out in the fall if they are serving masterclass or hubris. Well, that wraps our look at the very dusty remodel over at Nike. Thanks for hanging out with us to make sense of the noise, everyone. We will catch you after the next call.
See you next time.
Just a quick note before we sign off. If you want these episodes to show up automatically whenever new earnings drop, go ahead and follow the podcast. This entire show is actually generated using AI tools, really just testing if we can compress hundreds of pages of corporate filings into a quick, natural chat. We would love to hear your feedback or ticker requests, so drop us a line at earningsunscripted@datamadness.ca or grab the X link in the show notes.
Thanks for listening.